Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Freemasons trying to assist the Zionist Jewish people in rebuilding King Solomon's temple. You can look up the Freemasons and King Solomon's temple and see all the models they made. And then, of course, the current president, Donald Trump, has hugely assisted the Zionist Jewish people in declaring that the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, something that they have wanted for a couple thousand years. Oh my. A fulfillment of prophecy. So you have all these secret societies. You have the Rosicrucians. You have witchcraft organizations. Illuminati, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Bohemian Grove. And apparently Kabbalah has historically been the part of the religious practices, rituals, and beliefs of the Jewish people. And that's according to the Encyclopedia Judaica, 1973 English edition, published in Israel. And alchemy and so much more, sorcery. And then you have a lot of people into channeling, communicating with some archangels, beings, masters. And then, of course, you have David Wilcock, Corey Good, and so many others discussing ascension and galactic federations and alien beings. What are we to believe? Seriously. So I do a lot of reading, and in the back of my mind I had this particular idea where part of the home base might be, one of them anyways, of these entities who are living on planet Earth in a secret location. You got an underground facility in Australia called Pine Gap, and Dulce in New Mexico, and apparently all over the country there are underground facilities. Some of them apparently ancient, even under the Sphinx and the pyramids, and Romania in the mountains, Peter Moon's books I've gone over, Ecuador in the mountains, huge caves, seemingly cut out with laser beams so that people could survive the Great Flood thousands of years ago. And another place that's I've read about that's the mystery. Shambhala, the Secret of Shambhala, the search for the 11th insight, James Redfield. So I've been reading this book, and I came across one paragraph that kind of tells a story. And I think it's a story worth listening to. The energy of evil. So I'm just going to read the story and interject when I think I need to kind of make sense of it. But suffice it to say, this one archaeologist, professor, whatever, was going to the Himalayan mountains in Tibet, which borders China on its western border. And apparently, throughout thousands of years, the mythology is there's a secret city in the mountains, underground, Shambhala, Shangri-La, with these strange beings, tall, mystical, even with some kinds of telepathic powers. Shambhala. So what does this have to do with everything going on in the world today? And I believe it has everything to do with what's going on in the world today. And this book was published in 1999, so that's 20 years ago. And he talks about some things, ironically, that are very much in progress today, 2019, May 8th. 20 years later, where did this guy learn this stuff that's in this book? The Secret of Shambhala, the mystical city in the Himalayan mountains. Apparently the place of magic and maybe the foundation of the cult religions, secret societies. And apparently, if that's the case, they're bent on destroying Christianity and bringing about a global world order, if it is Shambhala. And I think I have a little bit of evidence to suggest this may very well be a place that is involved in the global world order with a bunch of elites, people or entities who think that they're better than the rest of us, and showing us the symbols everywhere. Let me just read this. No sooner had we walked out of the bedroom. Remember, this is an archaeologist, and this is part of his story. And the chapter is the energy of evil. So no sooner had we walked out of the bedroom that the sounds of the helicopters in the distance increased. And a lot of people who are into this kind of research, trying to expose what's going on in the world today, report having helicopters flying over their house and men in black. We've seen the TV programs and the movies. So it starts out with the guy walking out of his bedroom, and he can hear the helicopters. You get the background here? They're coming for him. Annie came into the house and pulled out 3 heavy backpacks from the storage bin. So they got to load up their gear and get the heck out of there. She handed them to us along with 2 parkas. I noticed that they seemed to have been conventionally made with cloth and stitching. I was about to ask about them, but she quickly ushered us out of the dwelling and led us down the path to our left. So they're making a dash to get away from the coming helicopters. And apparently they got parkers, so they're over there in the Himalayan mountains. As we walked, Annie moved up beside Tashi, and I could hear him telling her about the decision to go to the temples. So apparently in Shambhala they have these ancient temples. Just bringing you up to speed, this is page 177. The rumblings from the helicopters were coming ever closer, and the blue sky had now turned into a thick overcast. So like a mirage, the sky is turning overcast, foggy, right before their eyes with the helicopters coming. Apparently some kind of outside force is at play here. At one point I asked her where we were headed. To the caves, she said. You'll need time to prepare. We walked down a rocky path which traversed the side of a sheer cliff and onto a plateau on the other side. Here Annie waved us into a small gully where we huddled listening. The helicopters moved in a small circle over the cliffs and for a moment and followed our path exactly until they were directly over us. Annie looked horrified. What's happening? I yelled. Without answering, she climbed out of the gully and motioned for us to follow. We ran perhaps half a mile across the plateau into another hilly area and then stopped and waited. As before, the helicopters circled behind us until they arrived directly overhead. So somehow they're able to track them, even in the mountains. A gust of frigid air hit us, almost knocking me over. At the same time, all the clothes disappeared from our bodies except for heavy coats. So frigid air hit them and their clothes disappeared. I thought this might happen, Annie said, pulling more clothes from the packs. I still had my boots on, but Tashi's and Annie's had disappeared. Like I said, it appears to be some kind of magical land. She gave him a pair made of leather and put on another herself. When we finished, we made our way up the slope, climbing between the rocks until we arrived at a flatter area. I'm hearing some kind of noise in another room. It's distracting me. A heavy snow shower was beginning and the temperature was falling. The helicopters seemed to have lost their way for a moment. I looked out at the once green valley. Snow had covered almost everything, and the plants already seemed to be withering from the cold. So like a flash freeze. It's the effect of the soldier's energy, Annie said. It's destroying our environmental field. So the advancing helicopters with the soldiers trying to hunt them down apparently were emitting some kind of energy which was destroying the environment. Guess I gotta go close the door. I hear a noise. I had to make a video indoors today. In the nice weather, I like to do it outside. But now somebody's running a chainsaw. Before it was a lawnmower. So apparently the energy from people can infect the environment over there in Shambhala. Glancing toward the sound of the helicopters, I felt a new surge of anger. They banked immediately and headed straight towards us. "Let's go," Annie shouted. There's a point to all this. I moved up closer to the small fire, feeling the morning chill. We had walked for another hour and spent the night in a small cave. In spite of several layers of insulated undergarments, I was still freezing. Tashi was now huddled up beside me, and Annie looking out through the opening at the frozen world outside. The snow had been falling for hours. "It's all gone now," Annie said. "There's nothing out there now but ice." Can you imagine? The weather just changes, almost magical, because of the energy of the Chinese troops and helicopters pursuing them. I moved over to the opening and looked out. What was once a wooded valley with hundreds of dwellings was now nothing but snow and jagged mountains. Here and there were the bent-over remains of trees, but not a spot of color could be seen. All the houses had simply vanished. The river that ran through the center of the valley was frozen over. The temperature must have fallen 60 degrees. Annie added, "What happened?" I asked. "When the Chinese found us, the power of their thoughts and their expectations of frigid weather counteracted the field that we had set up to keep the thermometer moderate." So apparently, according to my material I've been reading here, there are something called thought forms. We create our reality. I'm sure many people have heard that before. Ordinarily, the strength of the fields provided by those at the temples would have been strong enough to keep the Chinese away altogether, but they knew it was a time of transition. And it might be noted right now, there is a big conflict over there. China is claiming Tibet as its territory, and Tibet says it's an independent sovereign nation. And in Tibet is where they have the Himalayan mountains, and apparently the home base of this mysterious underground temples facility, Shangri-La, Shambhala, with all these people who can, I guess, perform different kinds of magical feats. What? They let them in on purpose? It is the only way. If you and the others who have found us were allowed in, there was no way to keep out the soldiers. You are not strong enough to keep all negative thoughts out of your mind, and the Chinese have followed you here. So he says, "You mean this is my fault? That they had to flee and the Chinese were coming and the environment froze over?" It's okay. It's part of the dispersal. I wasn't consoled. I moved back to the fire, and Annie followed. Tashi had prepared a stew of dried vegetables. "You must realize," she said, "that everything is all right with the people of Shambhala. All this was expected. Everyone was here who is here is fine. So all those people that were living in that valley that froze over, apparently they're fine. The whole event was expected. Enough people came back from the temples to take them through these spatial windows to a new place of safety. Our legends have prepared us well. So apparently, I've been talking a lot about portals or other dimensions, even mentioned in the Kabbalah, the religion of the Zionist Jewish people, and many other Jewish people, alchemy, Church of Satan, the Church of witchcraft organizations, those kinds of things are on the rise. All the symbolisms on the railroad cars and bridges and buildings and industrial area with all the graffiti. You can go see all the skulls and all the freaky faces and the daggers and demons and all that. It's all about consciousness. That's what I'm trying to get across here when I was reading this. Remember, this chapter is the energy of evil. And there's a lot of important information in this one chapter. So let's go back to their little adventure and see if I can point it out. So the people had escaped through spatial windows, S-P-A-T-I-A-L. So apparently some kind of veil or a way to enter another dimension is the only way to enter into Shambhala, Shangri-La. I think a lot of people think this is all mythology. But then again, there's the symbolism is everywhere with the satanic symbols. And the Emmys and Grammys and demons and all of that, and tunnel openings and Eurovision, like the American Idol program. If you just look at that stuff or look it up on YouTube or the internet, a lot of people have made videos on those topics. This is real. So I wanted to get to the Shambhala discussion for quite a while. She stopped as we both heard the faint rumblings of a distant helicopters. The sound grew fainter and finally disappeared. "And you must be much more careful," she said. "I thought you knew not to allow negative images into your mind, especially hateful and disparaging thoughts." Now think about that, if there's power in that. Think about 911. People were mesmerized, programmed, believed the government story. And why shouldn't we? And then, of course, the government declared war on all those countries in the Middle East, bombing and killing millions of people in numerous countries. They needed the 911 event to kind of mind control and create the imagery in our minds and the fear of terrorism. It's important. It's mentioned in this material. This was in 1999. A couple years later was 2001. All right, so she's telling him to watch his negative thoughts. They have power. And I believe they have power all the time. They need to use propaganda, mind control, and apparently advanced technologies and drugs these days, mesmerization, TV, movies, billboards. They've got we the people under their control right now. We need to wake up quickly. I knew she was right, but I still felt confused about how all that worked. She looked hard at me. Sooner or later, you're going to have to deal with your pattern of anger. And right now, they are trying to divide the United States and probably the world with the people pursuing the New Age, transgender, Rainbow Coalition, anti-Christian philosophy. And then the people who will resist, who want to remain family values and Christians and believing certain things are wrong. And they'll have both sides fighting each other, believing that they're correct. The Christians and the Muslims and all the other people, decent people, will believe they are correct. these people following all these cults and New Age and transgender and alternate thinking will believe they are correct. They both can't be correct. And the symbols are showing us. Little logical thinking will, a lot of people can figure out which is which. I was about to ask a question when out through a cave opening, we saw several people walking down an icy slope to our right. Annie stood up and looked at Tashi. "There is no more time," she said. "I have to go. I have to help these people find a way out. Your father will be waiting on me." "Can't you come with us?" Tishy asked, moving closer to her. I could see that he had tears in his eyes. Annie stared at him and looked out the icy crevice at the other people. "I can't," she said, hugging him tightly. "My place is here, helping with the transition. But don't worry, I'll find you wherever you are." And go look at some Corey Good recent videos on YouTube. He's talking about some kind of ascension or transition that's about to take place. And then, of course, with President Donald Trump sending a fleet, an aircraft carrier, and a whole armada, however you say it, a fleet, and bombers off the coast of Iran right now, seemingly some kind of big event could happen momentarily. And then, of course, around Christmas time, 2018, the government announced that we need to be prepared for an EMP and the electric grid to go down for months. And then all this other stuff about terrorism, sustainability, and controlling the weather, and electronic technologies, and microwaves, and 5G, HARP transmitters, artificial intelligence, and all this other stuff. It certainly seems like it's all coming together for the proverbial perfect storm. And this material, this book, The Secret of Shambhala, Shangri-La, in the Himalayan mountains, where these mystery entities live, some kind of mystical, magical land, apparently something that's behind all these secret societies, and bragging that they're responsible for taking care of planet Earth and humanity. I'm a little skeptical. I don't buy it. And I have reason for that. I'll be showing a short clip eventually. So she walked toward the mouth of the cave and turned around to face both of us. "You will be fine," she said, "but be careful. You cannot keep your energy up if you're overwhelmed with anger. You must have no enemies." And that brings me to another point. People who leave comments on my videos, they leave nasty remarks like they want to kill all these people or kill all those people or hate all those people. And Jesus Christ taught we are to love our enemies. What I'm trying to say is, maybe they hate us. Maybe they are destroying us. But we need not get on their level. They may be evil. We don't want to be evil also. And I think even, like I said, Jesus Christ taught that, to love your enemy. Pray for your enemy. I can make these videos. I can point out what's going on. That's a good thing. But don't allow the hate and anger to possess you. Very important. We are spiritual beings. There's more to this reality than we know. We are more powerful. We create our reality. So if we the people were to wake up, we could put a stop to all of this. But apparently, as we've all seen in our surroundings, a lot of people are following these New Age cults. And it's all intentional, and it's in this material. She stopped and looked at me, and then said something I had heard many times on this journey. "And remember," she instructed, smiling, "you are being helped." So here we are. They're in the mountains looking for the temples in Shambhala. And she looks at him as she's parting company. "You are being helped." Tishy looked over his shoulder and smiled at me as we trudged through the deep snow. It was getting colder, and I struggled to maintain my energy. To reach the mountain range holding the temples, we had to climb down the ridge we were on, cross the frozen valley, and climb almost straight up and over another mountain. Oh my. We had made our way down almost a quarter of a mile without difficulty, but now seemed to be reaching the edge of a rock precipice. Below was a sheer drop-off of almost 50 feet. Tashi turned and looked at me. "We have to slide down it. There's no way around." And he said, "That's too dangerous." I protested. "There might be rocks just under the snow. If we start sliding out of control, we could be hurt." My energy was plummeting. So his fear was causing his energy to plummet. Tashi smiled nervously. "It's okay," he said. "It's okay to be afraid. Just maintain your visualization of a positive outcome. Fear will actually bring the Dakini closer. Dakini. Fear will bring the Dakini closer." So, we've all heard about demons or angels or gray aliens or reptilians and many other types of beings out there. And this here, they're talking about some being called a Dakini. "Wait a minute," I said. "No one ever mentioned that before. What do you mean?" "Haven't you been helped mysteriously, inexplicably?" Yin told me Shambhala was helping me. "Well, I don't understand the relationship. I've been trying to find out what determines when the Dakini help us." Dakini, not angels, pixies, trolls, demons, beings, elementals, all this stuff that's in the New Age teachings. Theophist Society, Kabbalah, witchcraft, reptilians, gray aliens, and so much more. Nancy Leader, the Vedas, Barbara Marciniak, the Palladians, Planet Nibiru, the Anunnaki, and so many others. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of this with my videos. Only those in the temple know that. I just know that fear always brings these guardians closer. Guardians, Dakini. And I went on Yahoo image site. I'll be playing a video here in a minute to try to get an idea, a visualization. Like if you look up angels on Yahoo image site, you'll see all these pictures and you get a good idea what an angel is. Or if you look up Lucifer or Satan or Homer Simpson or whatever, you'll get pictures related to that. Satanic Emmys, Grammys, Super Bowl halftime shows. Look it up. You'll see the images. So they're calling them guardians. I'm a bit suspicious. If we can maintain our faith to some degree, it is hate that drives them away. So hate drives the Dakini away. And apparently there's supposed to be some kind of guardians. Tashi followed me off the ledge, and we began to slide in the loose snow uncontrollably. My foot hit a rock and flipped me over, and I began rolling heads over heels. I knew that if my head hit another rock, it could be all over. But in spite of the fear, I managed to hold a vision of landing safely. With that thought, a particular feeling began to come over me, and I was filled with a sense of peace and well-being. The terror subsided. Moments later, I hit the bottom of the drop-off and rolled to a stop. Tashi slammed onto my back. I lay for a moment with my eyes closed. I opened them slowly, remembering other dangerous situations in my life when an inexplicable peace had come over me. Tashi was pulling himself out of the snowbank, and I smiled at him. "What?" he asked. "Someone was here." Tashi stood up and shook the snow off his clothes and began to walk on. "You see what happens when you stay positive? Whatever temporary strength comes from anger cannot compare with this mystery." I nodded, hoping I could remember that. For a few hours, we made our way across the valley floor, crossing the frozen river and working our way up the gradual slope to the base of a steep mountain. The snow was beginning to fall harder. Suddenly, Tashi stopped. "Something moved up ahead," he said. I strained to see. "What is it?" "It looked like a person. Come on." We proceeded up the slope of the mountain. Its peak looked about 2,000 feet above us. "There had to be a pass somewhere," Tashi said. "We can't go over the top." Ahead of us, we heard the sound of sliding snow and rocks. Tashi and I glanced at each other and moved slowly around a series of large outcroppings. As we made our way past the last one, we could see a man shaking himself out of the snow. He looked exhausted. A bloody bandage was wrapped around one of his knees. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Will. "It's okay," I said to Tashi. "I know this man." I stood up and crawled over the rocks. Will heard us and dived to the side, ready in spite of his leg, to run down a narrow draw away from us. So apparently Will didn't recognize who they were. "It's me," I called out to him. Will stood up tall for a moment and then collapsed again in the snow. He was dressed in a thick white parka and insulated pants. "It's about time," he said, smiling. "I was expecting you earlier." Tashi rushed over and looked at Will's leg. I introduced them. As quickly as I could, I explained to Will everything that had happened to me, meeting Yin, fleeing the Chinese, learning the extensions, getting through the gateway, and finally reaching the rings of Shambhala. "I didn't know how to find you," I added, pointing down to the valley. "Everything's been ruined. It's the effect of the Chinese." "I know," Will said. "I've already run into them myself." Will went on to tell us about his experiences. Like me, he had extended his prayer field the best he could and been allowed in Shambhala. He had extended his prayer field as best he could and been allowed into Shambhala. Well, I hope you're finding this to be an interesting story. Not usually a storyteller, but this little chapter seemed to be sharing some details I thought were important. So because he was able to control his thinking, his prayer field, he had been allowed into this magical, mystical city, Shambhala. He had been in another part of the rings, where he was educated further in the legends by another family. "The temples are very difficult to reach," Will said, "especially now with the Chinese soldiers coming. We must make sure we are not engaging in negative prayer." "I don't seem to be doing so well in that area," I replied. He looked at me sharply, concerned. "But that's why you were with Yin. Didn't he show you what can happen?" I think I understood how to avoid the general fear images. It's my anger against the Chinese soldiers that keeps slipping me up. Will looked even more alarmed and was about to say something when he heard the shouts of helicopters closing in the distance. We began our climb up the mountain, weaving our way through the rocks and the deep snowbanks. Everything seemed to be very fragile and unstable. We climbed for another 20 minutes without talking. The wind was increasing now, and the snow stung against our faces. I think this is where Mount Everest is. A lot of people go there to climb that mountain. We've seen the movies and the people falling to their deaths. It can be a very treacherous thing to do. I think those are the highest mountains in the world. "Listen," he said, "what's that?" "It's the helicopter again," I said, fighting my irritation. As we listened, the helicopters sliced through the overhanging clouds and began to fly straight towards us. Limping slightly, Will made his way further up the icy slope, but I paused for an instant, hearing something else above the noise of the helicopter. It sounded like a freight train. "Look out!" Will screamed ahead of me. "It's an avalanche." I tried to run out of the way, but it was too late. The full force of the rolling snow hit me in the face and knocked me backwards down the slope. I was tumbling and sliding, sometimes covered completely by the weight of the thundering avalanche, sometimes riding on the surface of the moving mass. Wow. That'd be kind of scary, being caught in an avalanche. After what seemed like forever, I felt myself come to a stop. I was packed in, unable to move, my body in a contorted position under the snow. I tried to suck in a breath, but there was no air. I knew I was about to die. But someone grabbed my outstretched arm and began to dig me out. I could feel others digging around me, and finally my head was free. I gasped for air, wiping the snow from my eyes, expecting to see Will. Instead, I saw a dozen Chinese soldiers, one of them still holding my arm. In the background, walked toward me, was Colonel Chang. Without talking, he signaled several of the other soldiers to take me to a hovering helicopter. A rope ladder was dropped, and some of the soldiers swiftly climbed aboard and then threw down a harness which they placed around me. The colonel gave the order, and I was hauled aboard as he and the remaining soldiers climbed in. In minutes, we were flying away. I stood looking out a portal-sized window by the 30 by 30 foot insulated tent. So now he's in some kind of tent at the camp. Although I could count at least 7 large tents and 3 small portable trailers of the size that could be airlifted easily, a gasoline generator hummed at the corner of the compound, and I could see several helicopters sitting in the area to the left. The snow had stopped falling, but had accumulated 12 to 14 inches on the ground. I strained to see to the right. From the lay of the mountain range in the background, I concluded I had been flown only as far as the center of the valley. A nighttime wind howled, flapping the outside seams of the tent. When I had arrived, I had been fed, forced to take a lukewarm shower, and given warm Chinese fatigues and insulated underwear to put on. At least I was finally warm. I turned around and looked over at the armed Chinese guard sitting at the entrance. His eyes had been following me every move with a cold, icy stare that chilled my soul. Fatigued, I walked over and sat down on one of the 2 army cots in the corner. I tried to assess my situation, but I couldn't think. I was numb, petrified, so fearful, in fact, that I knew I wasn't very alert. I couldn't understand why I felt so incapacitated. It was a panic as intense as any I had ever experienced. I tried to take a deep breath and build energy, but I couldn't even get started. The bare light bulbs hanging from the tent's ceiling filled the room with a dull, flickering light and an ominous shadows. I could find no beauty anywhere around me. The flap of the tent opened up, and a soldier stood up at attention. Colonel Chang walked in and took off his thick parka, nodded to the guard, and then focused on me. I looked away. "We must talk," he said, putting the folding chair over and sitting 4 feet away. "I must have the answers to my questions." Now he stared at me coldly for a moment. "Why are you here?" I decided to answer as truthfully as I could. "I am here studying the Tibetan legend. I told you that. You're here looking for Shambhala. I was silent. Is that it? He asked. Is it in this valley? So the Chinese were trying to find this magical city, Shambhala, Shangri-La. And apparently you can go look this up and buy books on the subject like I did. I have another one here I've been reading. And it is a part of human history, just like Atlantis or Hyperborea or Mu. So what's the truth? So there's some interesting information here. I'll keep reading on. So the general wants to know if Shambhala is in this valley. The fear churned in my stomach. What could he do if I refused to answer? So he said, don't you know? I asked. So he asked the general, don't you know? He smiled slightly. I would guess that you and the rest of your illegal sect think this is Shambhala. He looked puzzled, as though remembering something else. We've glimpsed other people here, but they have managed to elude us in the snow. Where are they? Where do they go? So apparently the Chinese military could catch glimpses of these people in the Himalayan mountains. He says, where are they? Where do they go? I don't know, I said. I don't even know where we are. He shifted towards me. We have also found the remains of plants recently alive. How is that possible? How could they have grown here? So apparently these people had some kind of magical power. They could control the environment in the middle of this frozen tundra in the Himalayan mountains. Interestingly enough, apparently, when they went down to the Antarctic, Admiral Byrd flew over the South Pole or in that direction, and apparently he found an oasis, all these plants and everything. So it does make you wonder about magic and this mystical activity. I think there's a lot more to our reality than most of us know. And I think it's important that we do think about it and look into it. Because, you know, they were even trying to get people to believe now that Jesus Christ really didn't exist and the church created religion to control people. But there's so much documented evidence in the Roman archives and archives of other countries going back 1,800 years, 1,900 years, and even the writings of Christ era, the activity 2,000 years. All that stuff was documented back then. The Roman governments and other governments documented everything. So apparently they're trying to, again, deceive us and get people to believe something is true that not's true. And Nexus magazine had some good articles on Shambhala. I'll dig through that stuff to make some more videos on this topic and try to see if we can uncover what's really true about this mystical place in the Himalayan mountains. So he was wondering how all the plants were flash frozen. I just stared. He grinned coolly. How much do you really know about the legend of Shambhala? A little, I stammered. I know a lot. Do you believe that? By now, I've had access to all the ancient writings. And I must say they are delightfully interesting as mythology. And apparently even the Hitler regime sent some archaeologists and professors into this area seeking some advanced technology and knowledge. I've gone over Peter Moon's books and the Black Moon and all of that. So a lot of these secret societies and cults are connected to this. Even Helena Blavatsky communicating with masters who appeared in her room from India. and maybe Shambhala, Shangri-La. Think about it. An ideal community made up of enlightened human beings that are far more advanced mentally than any other culture on this planet. Now that would be important. I've said this before, you know. Technology as we know it today has only been around a little over 100 years. 100 years ago, you couldn't get a internet or Wi-Fi or even a TV or anything. They were just starting out with the Model T car and locomotives. But in the last 100 years or so, it's taken a tangent curve, and it appears that the information has been fed to a lot of famous people like Nikola Tesla, who claimed it really wasn't him. He was having images and hearing voices and dreams. Apparently, so it seems, according to my research, somebody has intentionally taken us to this place we are today, where now they're going to have the artificial intelligence beast computers monitoring everything we do, controlling us, biblically, as it says, like the mark of the beast. And there seems to be a connection to this. So somebody needed these advanced technologies on Earth at this time. So probably prior to the Great Flood, thousands of years ago, there was advanced civilization like Atlantis or Hyperborea, etc. It was all destroyed. And there's a lot of ancient monuments all over the planet to kind of tell us that this did exist. They can't replicate some of the buildings and ancient monuments that exist today. The stones are just too big. Apparently they had advanced technologies to make molten rock. I guess to make rock melt and then make it hard again. That would be interesting. Anyways, back to the book. And I know the rest too. This idea that these individuals of Shambhala somehow have a secret power for good that permeates all the rest of humanity and pushes them in that direction. Shambhala somehow have a secret power, some individuals, for good that permeates all the rest of humanity and pushes them in that direction. Fascinating stuff, don't you think? Ancient lore that could even be appreciated for that matter, if it weren't so misleading and dangerous for the people of Tibet. So it does make you wonder, these people in the Chinese government are well aware of these mythologies. And even people like me have been out to Santa Fe, and there is an underground city called Dulce, and I went to Roswell, the museum, saw the replicas of the gray aliens. So, and there's a lot of documentation about underground military bases and subway systems, underground train systems. Again, I say, there's a lot going on that we don't know. There's a lot that exists we don't know. So continuing with the book here, don't you think if anything like that were real, we would have discovered it by now? God, Spirit, it's all a childish dream. See, this is what they're trying to convince people these days. God and Spirit, it's all a childish dream. What do you think? Do you think you're a spiritual being? Do you believe you have a soul? There's too much evidence to suggest that we do. Even the government is training remote viewers to leave their body and travel everywhere, apparently even backward and forward in time. I've got books on that. I've made book reviews. I'll be looking at that again and again and again. And you got something called the Mandela effect, where apparently some things in our time, reality, are warping. Things are changing. Somebody went back and changed something, the spelling, or a lot of weird stuff that people don't remember. Again, I say there's something more to our reality than we all know, and I think it's about time we all wake up to that fact. And this mythology of Shambhala has been around a long time, Admiral Byrd going down to Antarctica and finding a tropical wonderland is well documented, and so much more. Germany sent submarines down there, and after World War II, a couple of submarines surrendered to the officials in Argentina. So I made a lot of videos on these various topics, even with the Philadelphia experiment, where the ship disappeared when they engulfed it in microwave waves, microwave transmitters. They were just trying to hide from radar, thinking that the microwave transmissions would make the radar blurry and the enemy couldn't see you. But what happened was unexpected. The ship actually transported in time into a different place on the planet. And there's a lot of information that seems to show me that these electromagnetic forces in the form of vortexes, like a tornado, and take electromagnetic forces, and if you turn them, apparently you can open up a portal. And plenty of UFOs have seen coming up out of a gray spot in the sky like a portal opening, and poof, out comes a UFO, or a UFO will be fleeing away, and in front of it a portal will open and it disappears. This is all well documented. I've got well over 100 books or more on the UFO and alien topic. I've made plenty of videos. And again, we'll go over that stuff again and again and again, as long as I can, so that maybe we all can wake up to what is real about our reality, and at least admit to ourselves there are things that we don't know. Take the Tibetan mythology about the Dakini, the idea that there are angel beings who can interact with us, help us. What do you believe in? I asked, trying to diffuse the situation. So here the general is mentioning the Dakini, and he's also associating it with angelic beings. And of course, in the biblical story, a third of the angels were cast out of heaven, whatever that other dimension is. So that says that there are fallen angels mentioned in the Bible. And apparently, even the Jews, Hebrews back then, when they were guided out of Egypt by Moses, and he went up to the mountain to speak to the burning bush of the bright light and got instructions on how to build a golden chest, a box, called the Ark of the Covenant, where apparently they would carry it into battle, open the lid, and these energies would fly out and kill the enemy, sometimes have tantrums and kill the Israelis. And that they built King Solomon's temple just to hold this ark. And they're getting ready to rebuild it again. Even Israel is calling on President Putin in Russia and President Donald Trump of the United States and leaders from other countries all over the world to assist in rebuilding King Solomon's temple, whose only purpose is to house the Ark of the Covenant and have some kind of rituals take place where they sacrifice animals. Hopefully not humans. But then again, I am reminded of the sacrifice of humans going on all the time right now. You can get whistleblowers from satanic organizations, Illuminati. Even our government officials were photographed at the Bohemian Grove, where Alex Jones took a video. Apparently, they throw a baby in the fire, calling it a cremation of care. And throughout the past couple thousand years, many Jewish people were massacred, burned at the stake because of accusations of sacrificing humans. So again, I keep saying there's something going on in our reality that we all need to wake up to and see what's going on. So he is mentioning the Dakini beings, D-A-K-I-N-I, and he's associating it with some kind of angelic being, angels. So I made a video. Take a look at this and see if you think there's something we should be concerned about these Dakini. And are they really guardians here to help us? Or is there a more sinister, nefarious thing about them? You decide. You can go on Yahoo image site and look at the Dakini and Shambhala and the other things I mentioned in this video and see for yourself. And what if it's true? Hello, Rick Miracle here again with a word search on Yahoo image site. Dakini. Dakini. I'm not quite sure how to say it. D-A-K-I-N-I. Dakini. So here I am reading a book, The Secret of Shambhala, also known as Shangri-La, In Search of the 11th Insight by James Redfield. Shambhala, Shangri-La, Tibet, the Himalayan mountains, the Dakini. So apparently, the way the book describes it, there's some kind of beings that help people. But I'm just not seeing it. Here's a Dakini with a bow and arrow and skulls, heads wrapped around her waist, standing on a human being. Dakini engulfed in flames all around it. Goddess, divine energy. Dakini. Goddess, divine energy. Shambhala, Shangri-La, Himalayan mountains, Tibet. The land that's in dispute between Tibet and China. And you have these instantaneously accomplishing the Dakini, Buddha visions. It looks like some kind of I don't know, interdimensional being or in another world. Sky dancers. Look at the skulls. Look at the third eye on her head, on the top of her head. Eerily reminds me of the all-seeing eye on the back of the dollar bill above the pyramid. Is that a clue? This one looks like a kind of a monster. Dakini. Third eye is quite visible. Her hair is done up with some skulls. Naked. Very bizarre looking. So maybe a picture does say 1,000 words. When you're talking about the Dakini, what are you talking about? Divine feminine. It's part of the New Age cult teachings. Divine feminine, gay movement, gay marriage, transgender. Is this part of it supposedly coming from the Himalayan mountains, Shambhala, Shangri-La? Are these the entities behind the secret societies? Secret Dakini Oracle. So an oracle is like a prophet or a witch or a magician or a seer, a medium, a channeler. A lot of people are into listening to people who are channeling information. From whom are they getting the information? The new guide to Dakini land. I don't think I'd like to run into this Dakini in the middle of the night. Or during the day, for that matter. Look at this. This one looks a little more attractive, but she has the third eye on her forehead, an eye on her hand, an eye on her feet, floating in the sky. Dakini wisdom. So what is it about these secret societies, Rosicrucians, Illuminati, high-level Freemasons, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, witchcraft organizations, Church of Satan, Lucifer cult, Baal, B-A-A-L, Moloch? What does it have to do with the Dakini? So I was looking for the clues. So far I see the all-seeing eye as a clear clue. And the feminine principle in Tibetan Buddhism, part of the New Age teaching, quite bizarre looking pictures. Yeah, Tibet is in dispute right now. Quite bizarre, all-seeing eye, skulls, fire. So what do you think? Then I saw this picture, and I said, where have I seen that before? Dakini, Shambhala, Shangri-La, the land of mystery. Apparently some entities or beings living in the mountains. But I've seen this picture, so have you. So I went and checked out CERN Shiva. So apparently at CERN, where they have a collider, apparently some people are saying to open up a portal to where? Here's the Dakini standing on a human being on the bottom here in front of CERN. Says here, Pope Francis issues decree that the Jews should not be told what? About salvation in Jesus Christ. So when you click these images, you click the link. So what does the Dakini and CERN have to do with the Pope and Jesus Christ? So there's something here that we all should know. At CERN, Shiva, and then the 666 CERN logo you see here. A lot of this is common knowledge. But then I thought to myself, is this part of an unveiling of a new religion for the planet? And I remember when they put Kali or Shiva on the Empire State Building. Believe it or not, you can go look it up on Yahoo image site like I just did. And you got Kali, all-seeing eye, Dakini. Again, I ask, is there something we should know? Here in 1959, they have crosses on the Empire State Building. In 2015, they have Kali, goddess of destruction. And looks like an all-seeing eye in this picture. Looks like an owl, Moloch, in this picture. So you can go on Yahoo image site. Oh my, looks like an aborted baby. Empire State Building? There you go, connecting it with the Rainbow Coalition, transgenderism, pride parades, the rainbow colors, all connected. All-seeing eye, dollar bill, Dakini, Shangri-La, Shambhala, secret societies, mystical beings. And then you have the collider CERN. Supposedly, some people say, in an attempt to open up a portal involving our governments, obviously, costing billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars. Shiva statue at CERN. Shiva was the first yoga teacher. So you talk about yoga, meditation, the New Age, Rainbow Coalition, subatomic particles. What the heck is going on, I ask? Is that a fair question to ask what is going on? So you can go on Yahoo image site and find the lion-faced Dakini statue in this picture and click the link and get the scoop on what's going on. I guess you could buy this one. So what is this religion? That apparently is behind the New Age, behind apparently the destruction of Christianity, behind 911 to bring about a world global order, apparently destroying nations all over the world. This picture here doesn't look too friendly. What is going on? Here we have the wings. Dakini. CERN. Empire State Building. Rainbow colors. Wow. Goddess Kali. Looks like she has a head in her hand, dripping blood, a knife in her hand, standing on a man, skulls, bracelet around her neck that goes all the way down to her knees. Four days of one of the biggest yoga and chill out villages out there. Romania. Is there any doubt all this is connected to the popularity of yoga, meditation, the New Age, Rainbow Coalition? Cyber Angel Dakini. Cyber. And then you have CERN, the collider, opening up portals. You think they're telling us anything? All I can say is, oh my. Here's a Dakini power. And of course I'm thinking about the hat, Make America Great Again. Is this the religion the people want for the future? Should this religion destroy Christianity? That's what they're doing. They're even talking about the United States being on the verge of a revolution. And apparently it'll be against people that are going to resist this. And maybe 50% of the population or more of the people are being attracted to this. It looks like it wherever you go. This is a borderlines on space, the all-seeing eye, the cobweb, the spiders, witchcraft. Says a 64 Dakini oracle. Six-pointed star. That would be on the Israeli flag. Also represents the demon Moloch, fallen angel. Here we have a picture that says purification, the high priestess, the threefold riddle, secret Dakini oracle. I don't know what that lady's picture's doing there on the Yahoo image site. But again, we have CERN, the collider, involving many governments, lots of money. And then, of course, you have the Empire State Building, where they put Kali, the goddess of destruction, plus other images. So thank you for watching another word search on Yahoo image site. Rick Mariko reporting. Well, I don't care what anybody thinks. That's crazy. That's real. At CERN. Shiva's out there. Empire State Building. Kali's on there. The Hoover Dam, a giant goat. Sandy Hook. That one news reporter holds up a picture of an owl, Moloch. Bohemian Grove, California. They throw a baby in a fire. Apparently our politicians and elites from all over the world meet there, belong to that private club. They dress in long robes naked, and they bring in gay men for some kind of satanic sexual ritual. So the sexual thing seems to be part of this. And I've got a lot more information. Here's another book I've been reading. Shambhala, the Sacred Path of the Warrior. Himalayan mountains, Shangri-La, well documented. Hitler sent some scientists there to get some of the advanced technology. Apparently, they even have something called the missing years of Jesus Christ, where he went to Asia, China, and studied for a while. Apparently, when he was young, King Herod of Jerusalem, Judah, now called Israel, had ordered all the firstborn children killed because some prophet told him that a king would rise up and threaten his rulership and kingdom. So he wanted to nix that, so he had ordered all of the firstborn killed, and his family took him to Egypt. And then, of course, I was making a video, part 2, on Jeremiah in the Old Testament. And when King Solomon's temple was destroyed, about 550 years after it was built, by King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon, which is where Baghdad, Iraq is, 500 years later, after Moses guided the Hebrews out of captivity in Egypt, 500 years later, when Nebuchadnezzar is destroying Jerusalem and destroying the temple, and the people are tired of war, to flee for their lives and live in safety and to find food, they were fleeing to Egypt, the place where they were supposedly rescued from 500 years earlier. And apparently in Jeremiah, in the Old Testament, the Lord was displeased. He didn't want them to flee to Egypt. He was going to destroy the Egyptians in Jerusalem. So you have to wonder, what is all this about? And again, the government, I have to make a book review on this book. I've been reading it. Mind Trek, Joseph McMont-Eagle. Exploring consciousness, time and space through remote viewing. The government is into remote viewing. Joseph Monteagle tells all in the book. Remote viewing is the ability to correctly perceive and describe detailed information about a remote place, person, or thing, regardless of the normal boundaries of time and space. So if you believe this and all these other videos I've been making about all these authors, the Theophist Society, Morals and Dogma, the Freemasons, Bible, in the Kabbalah, and globalism, New Age, New World Order, and right is wrong and wrong is right, everything is backwards, you should be able to see it's all connected. This famous book here, look at this every now and then. Look how thick it is. But this caused quite an uproar in the world. The Hidden History of the Human Race, Forbidden Archaeology. Michael Cremo, Richard Thompson. Need to make a video on that and go over some details. Here's another book I got in the mail I'm looking at. Ordinary Magic, Everyday Life as a Spiritual Path. Edited by John Wellwood. So what are we to believe? Ancient monuments, the intentional destruction of Christianity going on now, intentional destruction of all those countries in the Middle East, bringing us 9/11, which mesmerized everybody to go along, some kind of mind control. How perfect was that? And they did the same thing to bring us World War I and World War II. They had false flag events. I've gone over that. We all know it's true if you do any research at all. And one of my commenters said on a recent video that I just re-released, he said that YouTube shut down his channel for a whole month because he was talking about the things I'm talking about. They don't want we the people to know this stuff. What's going on and who's behind it. Anyways, back to the book. And you can go look up the Dakini and CERN and Shiva and the Empire State Building and Kali and satanic rituals and the Emmys and Grammys and other TV programmings, American Idol, Eurovision in Europe. I've gone over this stuff again and again and again. The tunnel opening, they even had a demon with horns dropping from the sky. It's like we're living in the Twilight Zone. All right, back to the book, to the story. So apparently the general has captured him, and the conversation continues. So he pointed to his head. I believe in the power of the mind. This is why you should talk to me, help us. We are most interested in the idea of psychic power, the greater range of brain waves and their effects on electronics and people at a difference. When I read that in this book, I almost fell over. So here, this author wrote this book in 1999, The Secret of Shambhala, and the general says, I believe in the powers of the mind. This is why you should talk to me and help us. We are most interested in the idea of psychic power and the greater range of brain waves and their effects on electronics and people at a distance. But don't confuse this with spiritualism. The power of mind are a natural phenomena that can be researched and discovered scientifically. He ended his statement with an angry gesture with his hand. So this author, in 1999, wrote about the governments are interested in using electronics to control the mind. And I believe they've accomplished that goal. I believe all they need to do is to continue installing the 5G devices, wireless devices, and testing the AI, artificial intelligence software, create some event, a big false flag, World War III, whatever, some terror event, economic collapse. President Donald Trump sending a whole armada of ships off to the coast of Iran right now. Talks about invading Venezuela. And, you know, at what point do the people wake up and say, wait a minute, this isn't right? Do you think the powers, the elites that be, whether it is some kind of entities at Shambhala in the underground cities, at Pine Gap in Australia, even in Australia, people are talking about the dictatorship type of control of the government. And in other countries all over the world, they're even trying to convince Congress and the president to start enforcing some kind of Noahide laws and passing laws that people can't talk about Jewish people or Zionism or boycott Israel, anti-Semitism, making it a hate crime. With all those advanced technologies, they can know what everybody's thinking. Just like when I went to load up the video software for making a movie on this video a few minutes ago. After I make a couple clips, I open up the movie app and I download the clips and see how much time I've got. And my computer, which is a new one I just purchased at Christmas time, this computer would not let me open up the app without a lot of difficulty. I believe, whether it's artificial intelligence or other people in some kind of laboratory, whatever, I believe they have total control over our computers right now. So it may be a limited time that we can continue to try to understand the truth about our reality. So anyways, this author here writing this book, with the general interviewing him, interrogating him, he thinks to himself, I knew this man was extremely dangerous and absolutely remorseless. He was looking at me, but something attracted my attention along the wall of the tent behind him, directly across from the door where the guard was standing. The area had suddenly gotten brighter. The light bulb overhead flickered slightly, and I dismissed my perception as a surge from the generator. So you see some kind of glowing light over by the door. The colonel got up and walked a few steps toward me, looking more angry. Do you think I like journeying out here into the wasteland? How anyone survives out here is beyond me, but we are not leaving. We're going to enlarge this camp until we have enough troops to cover this whole area on foot. Whoever is here will be found and dealt with very harshly. So the Chinese government wants to deal with Shambhala, the mystical, magical place. With what kind of entities? The Dakini? And then they got CERN with the Shiva out front, the Empire State Building with Kali. What kind of reality beings are we dealing with? What kind of religion is behind the Kabbalah and all these secret societies and cults, witchcraft, Illuminati, alchemy? Fair questions? All this is verifiable. Hitler, like I said, he sent some archaeologists and scientists to this area, as well as to Antarctica. How did Hitler know about Antarctica? Did he get the information from Shambhala? Where did they get all their advanced technologies for the V-2 rockets and the Bell anti-gravity device? What kind of technologies do our governments really have right now? Why are they dumping so many chemicals in the sky? Why is my Geiger counter by the front door where I live, why is the radiation count double right now? And slowly, could they be poisoning us? Are these fair questions? The colonel got up and walked a few steps toward me, looking more angry. How anyone survives out here is beyond me, but we're not leaving. Whoever is here will be found and dealt with very harshly. He forced a half smile. But our friends will be equally rewarded. Do you understand? So he's trying to get this author here, who's in this story of this book, to tell him what he wants to know. At this moment, another wave of fear rushed through me, But it was very different. It was a fear mixed with a great disdain. I was beginning to loathe the extent of this man's evil. I glanced behind him to the area that seemed lighter, but it was now flat and filled with shadows. The lightness had disappeared, and I felt totally alone. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "The Tibetan people have a right to their own religious beliefs. You're trying to destroy their culture. How can you do this?" I could feel my anger making me stronger. My confrontation seemed only to energize him. "Okay, you do have opinions," he smirked. "Too bad they are so naive. You think that what we are doing is unusual. Your own government," listen to this. I couldn't believe when I found this in this book written in 1999. This is what the colonel says to him 20 years ago. "Your own government is developing ways to control you too. Chips that can be inserted into the body of troops and unsuspecting troublemakers." Like I've mentioned numerous times in my videos, I think it was 2013, I was in Melbourne, Florida on the coastline having lunch with a couple friends. Two women I know, my friend and her sister. And I had discovered through my research that in Texas and California, they were microchipping the children in the school systems. You can look all this up. I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't document it and talk about it before and have the evidence. And if you don't allow your child to get microchipped, they say you couldn't have access to the library or the cafeteria and the food program and all that. And one of my friend's sisters said, "Well, I don't know what's so strange about that. My husband's with the VFW, Veteran of Foreign Wars, and every Sunday they have a thing where people are bringing their children in voluntarily to have them microchipped." 2013 in Florida. So I suspect it's going on all over the country. Knowingly or unknowingly, people are being microchipped. And then, of course, with the wireless systems and the iPhones and the iPads and the computers like this new one, they can monitor everything we're doing. I guess there's no way where to hide. Run and hide. Anyways, back to the book. So the general is telling him, your own government is working on developing these technologies. And that's not all. He was almost shouting now. We know now that when people think, a special pattern of brain waves radiates outwards. So when I'm talking and I'm thinking, I'm radiating out energy waves. And apparently they have technologies now. They can receive that transmission and probably decode it once they get a sample of your brainwave. Can you imagine me reading this book, finding this information? Every government is working on machines that can identify these brainwaves, especially angry and anti-government sentiment. His statement chilled me. He was talking about the same misuse of brainwave amplification that Annie had warned me about, and the one that had doomed some earlier civilizations to ruin. So earlier civilizations like Atlantis, Hyperborea, whatever, these technologies and this misuse of it ruined those civilizations, according to this. Do you know why your so-called democratic governments are doing this? He went on. Because they are far more afraid of the people than we are. Our citizens know the role of government is to govern. They know that certain liberties have to be limited. Your people think there can be no individual self-direction. Well, if that were true in the past, in a highly technical world where a suitcase weapon can destroy a city, it cannot work any longer. And again, I don't think the general average citizen has access to suitcase bombs, but I think that the people who are trying to bring us this global world order do, and they do cause these false flag events so they can go ahead and justify taking stronger police action against the rest of us. They do want to enslave the population. And they've been making the movies and everything, Hunger Games, Divergent. They've been telling us. It's some kind of game to these people, playing with us. What kind of freedom? Humans will not survive. With that kind of freedom, humans will not survive. The direction, the values of society must be controlled and directed for a greater good. That's why this Shambhala legend is so dangerous. It is based on absolute self-direction. As he talked, I thought I heard the door open behind me. But I didn't turn around. I was focused totally on the man's attitude. Here was the worst of modern tyranny being voiced. And the more he talked, the more my loathing increased. What you don't see, I said, is that humans can find an inner motivation to create good in the world. But you think about 911. This is me. You know, people bought the government story, hook, line, and sinker. And bombed all those cities and towns in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, overthrew the leader of Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Ukraine, and so many more African nations. And over in Europe, it's illegal to talk about the Zionist Jewish issue. It's actually a crime after World War II. And now the Sanhedrin, the religious authorities in Israel, are trying to convince America's leaders to make that illegal here too. And they are trying to destroy Christianity. I've been watching videos, and those rabbis are fiercely convinced, or trying to tell us, that Jesus never really existed. He's a false Messiah. And if you enforce the Noahide laws, believing in a false Messiah is heresy, and heresy is punishable by beheading. This is some kind of insanity. But then the Bible prophesizes the Antichrist will come and these things will happen. What has been written is happening. And apparently it involves some kind of beings, mystical, angelic-like beings, and you saw what the Dakini looks like. Dakini, however you say the word. Doesn't look good. They put it on the Empire State Building. They got it out in front of CERN. And the symbols are in the Emmys and Grammys and Super Bowl halftime shows and American Idol and TV programming, cartoons, and everything. Symbols are everywhere, even on the dollar bill. There's your eye, the same eye that was on the Dakini, on Shiva, on Kali. Jiminy crickets, what's it going to take to get people to wake up? All right, back to the book. As he talked, I thought I heard a door open behind me. I read that. What you don't see, I said, is that humans can find an inner motivation to create good in the world. He laughed cynically. Surely you don't believe that. Nothing in history would suggest that people are anything other than selfish and greedy. That's why these evil politicians and elite people going to the Bohemian Grove and throwing a baby in a fire and all kinds of other sacrifices and rituals, they really think they're justified in doing what they're doing because all of we other people are selfish and greedy like them. But that's basic, fundamental 101 psychology. A thief thinks everybody else is a thief. A liar thinks everybody else is a liar. You get it? A perverted person thinks everybody else is perverted. Justification, rationalization, psychology 101. I learned that in community college many years ago. Back to this. If you had your own spirituality, you would see the good. So the reason they don't want us to have our Christian religion, because it is a concept of spirituality, where you should abide by the 10 Commandments, believe in Jesus so you can be saved. I believe we're spiritual beings, we have souls. But these people don't want people to be connected to the heavenly God world, Jesus world spirituality. They're obviously coming from another world. And it appears it's the underworld, Hades, hell, whatever you want to call it. And that's all mentioned in many of these books I've been going over. So if you had your own spirituality, you would see the good. My voice was raising in anger too. No, he snapped the general, almost screaming, spirituality is the problem. As long as there is religion, there cannot be unity among the people. Can you imagine how I almost fell on the floor when I read this, reading the book? This general from China, the Chinese government, they banned Christianity and other places all over the country. As long as there is religion, there cannot be unity among the people. They can't have their global world order. Don't you understand? Each religious institution is like an inflexible roadblock on the path of progress. Well, we see what progress is doing with all these 5G microwave transmissions and toxins in the water and food. Even the bees and the earthworms are dying. That's a strange thing, too. I've got 2 apple trees and 1 peach tree. And I got to tell you, last year there were some bees. I went out there this year. I've been looking and looking, and I hardly see any bees. The only bees I see are a couple carpenter bees. That's concerning. And there's been reports that the earthworms are dying. And, of course, we all know birds have fallen from the sky. And there are some reports that the deer out west are becoming dumbfounded. They just stand there like they're mentally empty. The deer. Like zombies. And then the people act like zombies. Back to the book. Each wars with the other. The Christians spend all their time and money wanting to convert everyone into their doctrine of judgmentalness. The Jews want to remain isolated in a dream of chosenness. The Muslims think it's all about camaraderie and collective power and holy hatred. And we in the West, we are the worst. We disrespect the real world for the fanciful inner life no one can understand. With all of this chaos of metaphysics, no one can focus on progress, on easing the burden of the poor, and seeing that every Tibetan child is educated. But don't worry, he went on, we're going to see that the problem is resolved. And you have helped us. Ever since Wilson James visited you in America, we've monitored your movements and the movements of the Dutch group. I knew you would come and that you would be involved. And the author of this book says, I must have looked surprised. Oh yes, we have known about you. We operate more freely in America than you think. Your NSA cannot monitor. Your NSA can monitor the internet. That's what I'm saying. I believe they're completely transparent on our computers right now. I got a camera going. I'm not even transmitting this live. This is just being recorded. I believe they can see me, hear me, and mess with my computer. And it does seem like when I get on certain topics or try to do certain things, my brand new computer will seize up, and so do my other computers. The system is coming online. Anyways, back to the book. Your NSA can monitor the internet. And the Chinese general says, do you think we cannot monitor the internet? You and this sect will never elude me. How do you think we could follow you in this weather? So the general is admitting he has technologies It was by the power of mind. My mind. It came to me where you would be. The general apparently has some psychic talents. Even after we were lost in the wilderness, I knew I could feel your presence. At first it was your friend Yin whom I could follow. Now it's been you. So again, why would Hitler send archaeologists and other scientists to this Tibetan, Himalayan area, Antarctica? And where did they get all that information from? The technologies of the anti-gravity device? Nikolai Tesla said he was having visions and hearing things in dreams, as well as many other scientists I have discovered were getting this communications, all these things that they invented or learned about through some kind of psychic, telepathic, dream communication, visual or hearing or dream states, or beings even appearing before them. This is all real. And again, it's time that people woke up, in my opinion. I've made a lot of book reviews on these topics. And that's not all. I don't even need to use my instincts to locate you anymore. I have your brave wave scan. He nodded towards the door. In a matter of minutes, our technicians will have mounted our new surveillance equipment. Surveillance equipment, brave wave scans, 1999 book about Shambhala, underground mystical city known throughout history. Secret societies having some kind of cultish religion involving things with these beings that can appear, like Helena Blavatsky and a Theosophist society, and the masters and beings from India just appearing in her room. Aleister Crowley, the evilest man alive, with lamb and ayahuasca, some master beings he was communicating with, who was, I guess, having him doing these sacrificing children, sexual children, rituals to have magical powers. Aleister Crowley, who wrote the Book of the Law, and if you read the law says, do as thou wilt, and the second law is referred to number 1, do as thou wilt. This is the opposite of the 10 Commandments and the other religions and the commandments from the heavenly God. Apparently not the God from the underworld. And people don't want to believe this. But hey, I read the book, make a video and talk about it and think about it, and it gets a little bit more clearer to me as I go along, even if it is a bit bizarre, like I'm in a twilight zone. I can understand why people would be freaking out on this information. So he's going to involve the new surveillance equipment. Then we'll be able to locate anyone that we have scanned. So all I have to do is scan you for the energy that radiates from your head when you think angry thoughts. And then every time you think an angry thought, you send out that frequency, and they've got you. And it's common knowledge to most people that we all have, each of us has an individual frequency signature, DNA code, frequency, whatever. Everybody's DNA is unique, which means the transmitted frequency is unique also. And I don't know why, but that probably has something to do with them trying to get DNA samples from everybody on the planet right now. Think about it. Surveillance systems, wireless systems, 5G systems, and the computers with the monitoring license plates and faces, even on Blue Bloods I was watching the other night. They were looking for this one girl, and all they had to do was feed the image into a computer system, and cameras throughout the city were just all automatically picking up when they seen it, and they were able to grab this girl rather quickly. Oh my, are we in trouble or what? At first I couldn't remember what he was referring to, but then I recalled my experience at the Chinese house in Ali after I was gassed. The soldier had put me under a machine. A new wave of fear raced through me, but it turned immediately into a deeper anger. The author says, "You're mad!" I screamed, and the general says, "That's right, to you. I'm crazy, but I'm the future." He was towering over me now, his face red, virtually exploding with anger. "Such stupid innocence. You're going to tell me everything. You understand everything." 1999 book, Shambhala, Secret of Shambhala. I've got a lot more. You've seen the Dakari. You've seen the pictures on the Empire State Building. You've seen the statue out in front of CERN. You've seen maybe some of the Emmys and Grammys and Super Bowl halftime shows with Madonna, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Katy Perry, all dressed up like demons and beings and all that. We all see what's going on with the government trying to push the transgender, homosexual agenda and calling Christians haters who are opposed to this. This is all real, reality. It's happening. So I've got about 15 minutes to go. Got more pages than I'm going to get done, but I think you get the gist of the story. I knew that he would not give me, I knew that he would not have given me all this information if he had planned to ever release me. But at the moment, I didn't care. I was talking to a monster. An overwhelming rage was filling me. I was about to verbalize his damnation again when a voice from the other side of the room called out, "Don't! It weakens you." So when we all succumb to anger and hate, it weakens us. And I tell you that when I make my videos and people make comments about hating somebody or wishing they were dead, and I'm like very upset about that. That is not what I'm doing. I'm saying that we should be aware of who and what they are, but we are not to get angry or hate them. We're supposed to talk to the spiritual power. And there's no power greater than that. And I'm not trying to be a religious teacher. I'm studying this stuff like a scientist. And this seems to be what the answers are. The colonel turned and stared, and I followed his gaze. There by the door stood another guard, and besides him, slumping against a small table, was Yin. The guard pushed him to the floor. I jumped up and raced over to Yin as the colonel said something in Chinese to the guards, then stormed out. Yin had bruises and cuts on his face. "Yin, are you all right?" I asked, helping him over to the cot. "I'm okay," he said, pulling me down to sit on the cot beside him. "They came for us right after you left." His eyes were full of excitement. "Tell me what happened. Did you reach Shambhala?" I looked at him and held my fingers to my lips. "Be quiet. They'll probably put us together to see what we would say," I whispered. "You can bet they have this place bugged. We shouldn't talk." "We'll have to risk it," Yin said. "Come over by the heater. It's noisy. Tell me what happened." For the next half an hour, I told him all about the world I had found at Shambhala. And then in the barest whisper, I mentioned the temples. His eyes grew wider. "So you haven't found all the fourth extension?" So I've got some more research to do to find out what this fourth extension is. On the front of the book, it says the 11th insight. So I'm not trying to study witchcraft or magic and all that. I'm trying to find out what's going on. But apparently the secret societies and all those occult organizations and elites at huge corporations that are working for our government, major aerospace corporations, RAND Corporation, consulting firms, Council of Foreign Relations, Heritage Foundation, all those philanthropic organizations, they know what's going on. Bohemian Grove, throwing a baby in the fire. They know what's going on. Whistleblowers leaving witchcraft groups or the Illuminati and other organizations, even the Freemasons telling all, they know what's going on. And I've gone over a lot of those books and showed you the information. So back to the book, page 192. I mouth, it's at the temples. I went on to tell him about Tashi and Will, and that Annie had said something about learning what those in the temples were doing. And what else did she say, Yin asked. She said we must have no enemies. All right, back to the book. 10 more minutes to go. She said we must have no enemies, I replied. Yin grimaced in pain for a moment and then said, but you are doing exactly that with the Colonel. You are using your anger and disdain to feel strong. Those are the mistakes I made. You're lucky he did not kill you immediately. I slumped back, knowing my emotions were out of control. Don't you remember when your negative expectation drove away the Dutch couple in the van? And you missed an important synchronicity? In that case, you were having a fear expectation that they were perhaps going to do you harm. They felt that expectation on your part and probably began to feel that if they stopped, they would be doing something wrong, so they left. So how much do our emotions have effects on our lives? You ever done anything you said, man, I shouldn't have done that, or I hadn't have said that, shouldn't have said that? I have. Every negative assumption or expectation, Yin continued, that we make about another human being is a prayer that goes out and acts to create that reality in that person. So I am aware how voodoo works. We are all different frequencies, and a lot of other people know how it works. When you make a voodoo doll, you need some of the hair or skin or clothing from the victim. And you put it in a shape of a doll to look like that person, so that there is a synchronicity, some kind of connection, because the hair that they took from the person's comb is connected by a fine little stream of energy because it's the same frequency DNA. And that's how the psychics and dowsers find missing people. They say, I need some clothing or some hair from that person, and then they use their mind and a pendulum and a map, and this higher world, this higher knowledge and ability works, and they can find somebody because we all have different frequencies. So when you think a negative thing about somebody or hate somebody, then apparently something bad can happen to them. So it's as much as doing it physically. That kind of power apparently exists. But also, you know, with the karma or spirit world, if you do something like that intentionally, you're going to be held responsible for your actions. Like the 10 Commandments say, number 6 and number 7 is do not kill or steal. So they're not there for just for suggestions, they're commandments. Remember, our minds connect. Our thoughts and expectations go out and influence others to think the same way we do. And again, I'm reminded of 911. The powers that be knew what they were doing. They knew what the kind of images the people would see with those buildings and people falling. And then when they blamed it on the Arabs, people would have their hate and anger and bring about that reality. So partly because of our ignorance, we were slightly, but we were a party to the devastation in the Middle East, not just the United States, but people all over the world, because the powers that be knew how to trigger, how to get people to think a certain way. That's what a false flag does. So remember, our minds connect. Our thoughts and expectations go out and influence others to think the same way we do. That's what you have been doing with the Colonel. You have been expecting him to be evil. Wait a minute, I was just seeing him the way he is. Really? What part of him? His ego or his higher soul self? And again, mentioning reading this and thinking with my brain. Me, you watching this video, everybody is at least two entities. This computerized physical electrobiological body with the memory. And then the spiritual higher self. Even our brains, the two lobes, the left and the right. The left lobe, this is the right lobe, this operates at an infinitely higher frequency than the left lobe, which operates at a frequency of what you see and me speaking and me thinking, which is actually very slow compared to the right brain. That's the stuff that makes people flinch before something happens. Look down before you step on a rattlesnake. Know when something evil is about to happen to you and you prevent it. The higher self is aware and can take actions to assist us. So these people who are into this witchcraft, Kabbalah type stuff, the secret societies, they're aware of these natural sciences, abilities, the science of the spirit world. And they know there's a heavenly world and an underworld, different kinds of beings, and they've been able to interact and control these beings, like the Huna in Hawaii, the Kahuna witchcraft doctors, whatever you want to call them, shamans, that are able to harness deceased souls and actually imprison them and send them out to kill people. This is common knowledge in Hawaii. And even King Solomon of Judea, who built King Solomon's temple, had a six-pointed magic ring for the demon Moloch or Rephaim, one of the fallen angels, and he could control demons according to the Bible, and that's where he got his power. So the spirit world exists, and apparently there are good forces, the heavenly world, and there are evil forces. And the commandments for the good forces, or the 10 commandments, are similar ones. All the religions of the world. I took a comparative religious course in humanities at community college, which was taught by an Iranian teacher, incidentally. And so the commandments for most religions all over the world are similar. But the evil forces like Aleister Crowley and the Church of Satan and all of that, and Sabbatai Zevi, a prophet for the Jewish people in 1666, their commandments are the opposite of the 10 commandments. They promote doing evil. And actually, if you want to be a good Satanist or evil person, you're required to do evil every day. You need to literally be good at doing evil if you want some kind of redemption or wind up in a high place in the underworld or something like that. Crazy, you think? So these two are having a conversation in the tent. He goes, what part were you really interacting with the Colonel? His ego or higher self? Yin was right. All this was something I thought I'd learned with the 10th insight, but I wasn't acting on it. So we can learn all of this stuff and study all of these books. Find out what's going on and who's behind it. But if we don't change the way we think and realize what they're doing to us, there's not a darn thing we can do about it. We need to wake up and think right. If we're going to manifest something, we need to manifest a better world to stop what seemingly is running like a freight train in our reality, going to bring us this global world order. Maybe World War III, maybe President Donald Trump sending those ships to Iran this week, and the bombers in the news, front page. Can you see how that would manifest images in people's minds, and our thoughts radiate? We're creating a reality. And they're leading us like a Pied Piper with the newspaper headlines and TV programming and false flags and shootings. And we're falling for it, hook, line, and sinker, as the story goes. Were you thinking of him, Yin asked, expecting him to follow you? I must have been. Don't you remember? That's what was happening with me earlier, and now you are doing the same thing. That expectation was creating the thoughts in Chang's mind of where you were. It was an ego thought, but it came to him because you were expecting, praying in effect. So when we are expecting something and we're radiating those thoughts, according to what I'm reading here, it's a way of prayer. And even in Marvin Antleman's 2 books, Volume 1, Volume 2, To Eliminate the Opaque, Series 45, go watch my videos. To eliminate the opaque means to eliminate you or I and everybody else from believing in God and praying, radiating out that kind of stuff. They don't want people to know that that works. Interesting that I would find this information and put it together with this book, which you can go on the internet and find a copy, used bookstore, maybe new, probably at archive.org. You can probably find a free copy. And James Redfield wrote the book Celestine Prophecy. Celestine Prophecy. And there's an interesting story about that book. Celestine Prophecy. So when I was a younger man, let's say 30 years old, I had a couple tough things happen in my life. And like anybody else, I'm susceptible to depression or whatever. I was 30, and I couldn't shake it. And there were some family things going on, and I felt I was being wronged, and there was nothing I could do, and things were hopeless. I was 30, a long time ago. I went to see this doctor. I said, there's something wrong. Do I need to take some kind of medicine? I have this depression. Anyways, he did give me a shot of cortisone. It seemed to kind of perk me up a little bit. But he gave me a book to read, believe it or not. And I'm reading this book by the same author, The Celestine Prophecy. And it's about an archaeologist going to Peru and discovering some of the things that are in this book that are kind of mysterious. So in other words, I read the Celestine Prophecy, and it gave me a huge awakening 30-something years ago. And I realized, I like snapped in my head, and I said, wait a minute, why am I depressed? I'm not the one causing this grief. It's these other people in the family. And I shook the whole depression thing. I realized it was like an awakening. I didn't do it. I'm not responsible. That other person is having a little bit of a mental illness problem. And because they're radiating it on me, I was sucking it in, and I was getting depressed. So that doctor gave me the Celestine Prophecy to read, and I was able to shake off that depression because it was something I believed or what I thought. And it gave me an awakening that I realized it wasn't me, and I can't be responsible for other people treating me or other people badly. Just, it was an ironic thing that happened back then. So apparently our emotions, according to this stuff here, and I'm not trying to preach this material, I don't think I'm a big fan of Shambhala and Shangri-La and the Dakini, those beings they're putting on the Empire State Building in front of Shiva and all the other symbols, satanic symbols and everything. I don't think I want to follow those cults. I'll stick with the New Testament and what Jesus taught, and that believing in him I will be saved. I'll watch what's going on in the world around me, but I won't have hate and anger. I'll pray that the world wakes up and people wake up. And I think that's a powerful thing. And even like I said, Marvin Antleman wrote those 2 books. To eliminate the opaque. Opaque's like a drug. It calms you. It gives you comfort, believing in God and praying. They don't want you to do that. Written by the leading rabbi for the Jewish Congress, exposes all the evil goings on with the Sabbathite Jewish people, Zionists. So a lot of Jewish people that are Orthodox who believe in God and Jesus and the 10 Commandments, and they know what the evil forces are trying to do. It's in these 2 books. I made videos on this, Series 45. So when you put all this together, the sacred path of the warrior, and these symbols, and the government involved in remote viewing, and all kinds of other technologies to read our minds by the radiated radio waves or brain waves. And then all the other technologies with these cell phones and iPhones and smart refrigerators and smart cars and smart meters, and they know what they're doing. We don't know what they're doing, and many of us have an inkling, but we don't want to face it. And then if we did face it and we see it, we don't have to have fear. We don't have to have anger. We need to wish the world well and other people around you. Start practicing that in our daily lives and sharing it with people. That can change things. I'm not trying to create hate videos and anger. I'm trying to say that we need to wake up to the reality that's going on in our world. And they don't want that. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Merico reporting.